You know, delivering excellence is more than just 18 wheels moving products around the country. Trucking is complex, and its people are passionate. Accommodating a diverse driving workforce, ever changing regulations, supply chain demands, and new technologies all present their own challenges, but in trucking, the creative and the innovative succeed. Let's understand the people that drive and support the trucking industry, and welcome to Garner Trucking's Beyond the Cab. Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Cab. Today I have a couple of guests from all over the country at this point. We've got some pretty unique stuff to talk about today in regards to technology, training, and our next generation. So with me today, we're from the next generation of trucking, our president and co-founder, Lindsay Trent. Lindsay, thanks for joining.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And also the CEO of Beyond Trucks, Hans Gilland.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tim. So glad
Thank
to
you
be
both
here.
for taking the time to speak with me today. I'd like to, before we get started on the content, love to hear a little bit about each one of your backgrounds. So Lindsay, if maybe we could get started with you.
Yeah, so in terms of my trucking background, I've been in trucking about 12 years, and I really knew nothing about the industry before I got into it, but was looking to get back into a sales job, and I got a job doing driver staffing. And at that time, I really fell in love with the industry for the people. And then another reason I fell in love with the industry was because of the fact that it touches every other industry. So one day I would be at a granite warehouse, the next day a lumber yard, and then a packaging company. And it was just really neat to see all other industries. And they had one thing in common. They needed trucking to ship in and ship out supplies. And so that was my start. And then I worked for Ryder after I worked for driver staffing. And then within that, I started the Next Generation in Trucking Association, just because every day I had so many conversations about the workforce shortages and the need for young people to get into the industry, the aging workforce. And I think that Next Gen, we've come up with a cohesive solution to help really form and shape the next generation to steer them towards careers in the trucking industry.
I just recently got back from Truckload Carriers Association safety meeting. We were talking a little bit before we started the real conversation here today, and I thought it was interesting that there's a pilot program right now for 18 to 21 year olds. There are unfortunately only about 16 carriers that are participating in the program. They're looking for about 3,000 drivers ultimately to go through this program and statistically get the information that the government's after to be able to prove that what I believe all along is that 18 to 21 year old is completely capable of driving a tractor trailer under the right circumstances with the right training and the right equipment. It's that simple. So a program like Next Generation Trucking really kind of embodies that thought process and truly what I'm feeling, and starts from very organically from a younger age to try and get some interest for the trucking industry. And I think in retrospect, knowing you for the last couple of years and watching what you've been able to do with the organization, just amazing things, amazing reach. I see you everywhere. So, you're having impact on the industry, which I think is tremendously important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the fun part too is really making an impact within education and getting to see the aha moments where educators are saying, oh, I never thought about trucking in the supply chain, and I didn't realize there were so many jobs and they paid so well. And maybe this is a good industry to start getting young people interested in. And so a lot of good things and momentum is happening. And we are really excited about what we're doing every day. It's so rewarding just to be a part of helping young people find good jobs. And I think that we in the trucking industry have good jobs.
I absolutely agree with that. Also joining us today, Hans Galland. Uh, Hans, tell me a little bit about Beyond Trucks. I've had the good fortune here for about the last year or so to get to know you a little bit. You've stopped by the office a few times, and we've had some great conversations. Tell us a little bit about your situation. How it came to be Beyond Trucks. What
How
brought
did
you here?
how did it happen? Yeah. So
How did
Beyond
it
Trucks,
happen? Yeah.
how did it
What the
happen? Yeah,
why?
and why? I think the why is very fundamental of who we are as a founding team and as people. And I think very similar to Lindsay, what connects us to Lindsay is is impact. We have been driven from day one by the hope that even though we didn't grow up in trucking, we hope that we can help trucking develop and evolve and flourish with our expertise and our knowledge. And so what I've learned very early in my career, my first job at the age of 15 was actually in a tool factory. My second job at the age of 16, 17, and 18 until later in my career was in hotels and restaurants. So I've always started at the ground floor. So the first thing that we did when we started to work in trucking is actually we got truck driver jobs. I publicly admit that this was the first time we had to lie on our resumes to get a truck driver job. We had to delete degrees from our resumes. And so both my co-founder Paul and I, we got driver jobs. We drove for a little while. We didn't drive for as much as we probably need to be good qualified drivers at all. But we start to understand what it means to be the most important and valuable asset in a trucking company, and that's the driver. We worked in dispatch. We started building a trucking company. But that was really fundamental for us to understand the challenges that people face in their jobs, in their work life. And then we went back to where we had been trained more recently in, and that was really very advanced technology, anything from artificial intelligence, automation technology, software, and finance. And then we put all the pieces together and started building Beyond Trucks as a platform that can help carriers really become, we call it digitally native, really become deeply digital and streamlined as a result of how they work. And never forgetting the most important part of the carrier, that's the people in the carrier. So how do we make people in a carrier more productive, happier, and more fulfilled in their roles with technology? That's really at the core of the impact that we want to create with the company.
I think one of the interesting things about Beyond Trucks is exactly the last point that you had made, in that from the standpoint of workflow specifically, a lot of us that are out and driving don't get an opportunity to kind of see behind the curtain of what has to happen in order to make that all go, and those folks are just as important. And it becomes challenging at times when you're purchasing systems that are, straight out of a box, and you have to kind of conform your workload and your workload and workflow to that out of the box product. Whereas the Beyond Trucks approach is just a bit different and looks at the workflow itself first and builds design based on that. So I think it incredibly important, especially as we get further down the pike of the digital world, as you're pointing out. Lindsay, what would you say is the most important thing to the next generation coming into the workforce?
Wow. I think that Gen Z, they have some things that are definitely really important to them. But I think one of the main things is that they want to be just known as a person they actually want to have an impact. They want to work for a company that has social impact, that cares about the environment, that cares about technology. And they want to work for a company where they're not just a number, but for a company that cares about them as a person, cares about their family. And it's not always about the bottom dollar. It's about making a contribution to society. And I really think that the quicker that we see that and start really showcasing how we do that as companies, the better off we're going to be in attracting this generation.
It certainly is a challenge. I think, as an industry, as you pointed out, we're necessary in every segment of everything that you purchase. At some point in time, it's on a truck, and so making that extension and that connection to the driver, that next generation driver, to say, hey, you are valuable, you are important, you are having an actual impact on local economy, global economy, and making that tie together, I think is a good thing. Do you, Hans, from your perspective, that technology that we were talking about, that digital side of things, obviously the next generation is fully prepared to handle that, most of which born with a cell phone in their hand at this point. But there is a definite generational set of gaps, and that technology is moving so fast now. We still have many individuals that are in the industry that can remember logging on paper, that can remember how to plan a trip using an atlas, that can remember they had to dial a phone when they stopped somewhere and use a pay phone. What would you say? Or would you say that there's a divide there between that old generation and newer generations in terms of technology? Or do you think we're coming closer together because we're all kind of forced into the same, we're living in the same world?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, Tim. I do think that technology is to blame for some of the issues we have, in the sense that a lot of technology today doesn't fit or help with some of the communication challenges. It's not necessarily designed to be the most user friendly or friendly to the human, the operator. We most recently went live with a customer in a very rural area where we had very big concerns that the drivers would actually not move off flip phones or not even want to have a phone. But when we showed the difference of how it makes their life easier, they actually really loved it. And so I think a part of the problem in this divide between generations is that the product hasn't been built to make life easier. And I think we're seeing a lot of change on that front. We're seeing it with some of the ELDs. They're super easy, user-friendly, and we see it with some of the other providers. So I think part of it is technology to blame. And, if Gen Zs come into a company and they're used to run their daily lives on an iPhone that's super user-friendly, and they see something that's less user-friendly, they may be a little surprised, right? So a little bit of that is product design. But I also do think there is the interesting phenomenon that we sometimes see, that just work and life has become very different, right? Previously, you could just sign off from work and you're done. You leave the office and you're done. And today, a lot of the people who have been growing up with a phone just never stop working, right? We never stop. And sometimes we see some of the conflicts really around how do I work? How do I interact with my environment? And that's more it's worth a conversation. It's sometimes we don't really realize that the way we used to work creates certain expectations that we always have to be in the office. And other people just work from home, right? So I think there's also a shift in how we work, and that creates some of the friction.
Lindsay, would you say that there's a level of surprise or shock for that next generation in terms of the technology that trucking's using today? Any experiences there or feedback from that younger generation?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of within the truck and under the hood of a truck, I think that they're very surprised when they see how comfortable a truck can be, the technology. Um, we have it in our cars, but they don't necessarily realize that trucks have it too. The lane mitigation and collision avoidance, and just being able to have those types of things in a truck is surprising to them. Most of them have never seen the inside of a bunk. And so just seeing that it's like a tiny house on wheels is something that is pretty impressive. The other thing is one thing that we are trying to encourage companies to do is to reach out to their local school districts and have them come on site and do a field trip. I was a part of a field trip this past year, probably just 2 months ago, with PACCAR Parts, and they have a brand new distribution center in Louisville, Kentucky, and we brought in about 50 automotive technology high school students. So these are students that want to work with their hands, and the teacher that is their teacher, he had never been inside a working warehouse and distribution center.
Mm.
And so if they don't know what's behind the walls, then they're not going to see how exciting a warehouse space can be and how technological advanced they are. It's impressive, but they have no idea. From the outside, it almost looks like it could be a prison, right? It's a little scary.
Right.
So we need to bring them and invite them inside to our world so that it is less intimidating. And when they are ready to graduate, they can say, you know what? I saw a little bit of that world and I want to explore more about maybe me being involved in that.
I think you illustrate a great point. One of the things that I may sometimes take for granted, but have had the fortune of doing, is a lot of times when you do a customer visit, getting a chance to really kind of see the nuts and bolts or behind the curtain of what's going on at that facility. And I recall several years ago now, we went to one customer that actually had automated forklifts. So there's, basically the tracking for it, the communication actually ran under the concrete. There was no one actually even handling the forklift at all, and it would know where to go, where to pick up the freight, move it to another portion of the warehouse, get it out of line, or move it to wherever it needed to go. And again, no human interaction at all with that particular piece. Something you would have never seen if you weren't there to see it for yourself, type thing. So those types of technologies have existed for years and years, but for most of us, we never get an opportunity to even understand what that actually means. And like you said, how exciting a warehouse can be, which sounds weird on the surface, but you're absolutely right.
That does sound weird, but it is exciting, and it is something that young people are excited about and interested in, is technology.
And I think it's also fascinating when you see it from the technology side. We interview people who think it's absolutely cool to be a data scientist in a trucking company. Like, how cool is that, right?
Right.
And sometimes when we look at from the trucking company inside out, it may seem like a stretch, but there's a lot of people in technology and math and data science who really think it is fascinating to really have an impact with their craft on an operating business like a carrier. So we see the other side of that too, and there's so many cool careers that exist in the industry that maybe previously didn't exist, but nowadays will exist going forward.
Yeah, and Hans, he gave me some definitions. We're going to be at the end of the month at the Technology Student Association. So they are students, high school students that are wanting to be engineers and technology in the technology field. And so we are going to be there representing trucking within the space of technology, data scientists, engineers, product testing engineers. Because if you talk to most kids who want to be an engineer, they have no idea that they can be an engineer in the trucking industry and help develop the technology within the truck, on the outside of the truck, within the supply chain. So we have to be able to have trucking as a career brand out there in this space.
Absolutely right. I think even not that this is a simple thing, but just a few years ago, we had decided to hire an intern for the summer to help us part time for doing a little bit of social media work for us. After that time frame was over, we realized we couldn't live without her, and so we ended up creating a full-time job for something we didn't even have before, but it's very necessary now. So to your point, I mean, those things as time goes on, the things that maybe you didn't need 20, 30 years ago, you absolutely need today. What do you think that the training looks like for the next generation when you talk about trainers, mentors, and for the individual being trained?
Well, one thing I can tell you is that there are 10,000 baby boomers a day that are retiring. That's a big number.
Massive.
Massive. And conversely, only 57% of boomers have shared even half of their knowledge to the younger people that work below them. And so we have got to make a concerted effort for baby boomers to share that knowledge before they leave, before they retire. They have so much wealth of things to give, and we need to be inviting baby boomers into the space of mentoring and helping and teaching before we lose all of their knowledge and experience.
I think you bring up a great point, and we in previous conversations, sharing some of the struggles, with our organization. We've had some retirement that's happened over the last year and a half, and you start to kind of take a look around you, especially, I'm accustomed to, seeing the same people every day and having great experiences and great relationships with those folks. And again, over the last year and a half, you just watched this kind of migration away from working and enjoying retirement, fruits of labor, which is what we all look forward to. And as I look at that, I'm looking at myself and thinking, okay, I'm, kind of last man standing or pretty close to it in terms of tribal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized about a year ago that the kind of the gravity of what that really means is I only have so long to be able to convey those things to everyone else that's going to continue, holding the torch and continue to move things forward. So to your point, I absolutely agree with that statement, that tribal knowledge that exists here, the cuts, the dents, the dings that we all go through, you've got to be able to pass that on. Hans, yeah. What do you see from your end as far as training and maybe the technology that could help bring us there?
Yeah, I actually think that how we look at experience and knowledge will radically change over the next couple of years. So I think what we've seen with artificial intelligence is that things that can be easily learned from existing text or data can be easily replicated. So when some people have seen ChatGPT or some of the new tools, how good they've become in creating text. It's amazing. And they literally just learn from other texts and how to write a good text. But it kind of makes you question, why did I go to elementary school or even junior high, right? It's like, why did I spend so much time? So that part is probably going to change quite a bit in how we learn about, for instance, writing. I think what also is going to change gradually is how do we make better decisions? And that's part of the tribal knowledge where we spend a lot of time on is how do I dispatch a truck that makes the maximum amount of money for the company? And the human brain is pretty good at that, but sometimes math can be more powerful. So we'll probably see some of the tribal knowledge be replaced or improved with math. And that's optimization. So optimization can actually be quite powerful. There's still, though, a part of tribal knowledge that will be impossible over the next probably couple of decades to replace. And that goes back to wisdom, judgment, creativity, common sense. Common sense is one of the most difficult things to replace with artificial intelligence, believe it or not.
It's
So
not so common. That's why.
it's not so common. And so there may be a great outcome for a dispatch route, but you still need a human being making sure that this is actually viable and makes sense. It may not make sense. It may make sense to the algorithm, but it may not make sense to the town. So what we're describing is the importance of the retiring generation passing on tribal knowledge, passing on experience, judgment, creativity. All of these things is super, super critical. And I think we need to find a better way for this to happen, and to build that dialogue. So mentorship is a great way of doing that. And I think people retire, increasingly early, right? So, but everyone wants to have a third, fourth, fifth, sixth career. So how are we doing that? And I think there's great opportunities in trucking to pass that on.
Lindsay, do you believe that the next generation wants or values that tribal knowledge in the way that it's communicated? Maybe that's a part of whether they want it or don't. But I think it's an interesting point, an interesting question.
Yeah, I think that just what you said, it's the way of communicating it, right? They don't want to be talked down to, and they want to have a voice. And so the best way to be able to pass down tribal knowledge is not just a one-sided conversation. If I'm teaching you this and this is what you should do, this is how I've done it, this is what you need to do. But it's a more of a two-way conversation. And so they want their opinions valued, and they want to be known. So maybe it is going in there and talking about something and asking their opinion about it or what they would do, and then saying what you've done in the past and making it more of a conversation, and wanting to know who they are and what they do and passing it along like that, as opposed to just saying, this is what we do, this is why, this is who we are. It needs to be a conversation.
Do you find that the next generation has value in the why of the situation, the explanation behind why we make this decision or do things this way?
I think to understand, they value the why. They want to know the reason, and that's why it's important for them to know the why.
Hans, what do you think technology looks like given, let's say, another 15 years? What's the future look like?
Yeah, I highlighted it a little bit earlier in saying that I think there's somewhat menial tasks that we're wasting a lot of time with today. Menial, right? Repetitive manual work that probably we can get away with, do away with, and there is some improvement work, some optimization work that we can leverage technology for. So lane keeping in the cab, it would be a kind of lane keeping, right? Making sure that you're staying within the lane and not deviating from it is one example of a very simple optimization task. Or it could be, what's the best combination of loads to get the maximum profit for my carrier, for my fleet. So these are optimization tasks that will become much better. I think the limits will still be around, how do we become more creative? How do we make better decisions? How do we deal with each other? I think the human aspect is one part. Is we still want to work together in a company and be happy people. The human aspect will be so much more important. And I think the people who really succeed are either the very, very technically savvy people. I mean, computer scientists, data scientists, and then the people who are really, really good with people. I think that's what I foresee how we will fit into kind of the divide between technology and people. And it's going to be different, but I actually think it's going to be very exciting, because hopefully we all can focus more on things that are more fulfilling than processing paperwork.
Right? Moving papers around, those types of things. So how does trucking prepare for these changes in technology in this next 10 to 15 years? What can we do to kind of fortify and be ready? Oh, that's open-ended. That's open-ended. Yeah.
Hans question.
I can start. I think one thing is we should define the problems we want to solve. Sometimes we worry too much about solutions, and maybe that's also for for both the next generation who's entering trucking, but also the retiring generation that has lots of tribal knowledge. Usually when we talk about about problems, we all agree what the problems are, but then how we come to the solutions, then the next generation may have very, very creative ways of dealing with the problems today, and they may find shortcuts that the retiring generation never thought about. So I think what's really important is kind of to gather around problem areas that we want to solve, and then find creative ways that the old ways and the new ways all may have valid points to solve them. And I think that's probably the best way to get ready for the future, is focus on the problems and start cranking solving them.
Lindsay, would you say that you have any particular individual or moment that stands out so far with that next generation in terms of the success story of kind of your adventure so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so many success stories. I could just tell you from week to week, to be honest. One of the things that really got me interested in starting the Next Generation and Trucking Association was being on my local high school advisory board. We started a diesel tech program 4 years ago, and I got to help start that. And it was really fun to be a part of. I'm still a part of it today. I go to all the advisory board meetings. And one of the things that is just so inspiring to me, the teacher, he said, my students, when they graduate, they're going to go out, because they do diesel tech here at our school and for 4 years. So they start as a freshman, and they're really learning lots of aspects of being a diesel technician. They're in school half the day in class for diesel technology. And by the end of their high school, they're doing work study. They're ready to go and work when they graduate. And in this particular area of town, the teacher says, most of their parents don't even make the amount combined that they're going to start off making. So what we created for the industry has quickly morphed into, well, we're doing this because we want to help better young people's lives through these great careers that we can offer in the trucking industry. When they learn in high school that they can become a diesel technician, or they're learning about being a professional driver, and they can go into the workforce and make a living wage, we are literally changing somebody's family tree that might not have that happen for them, and that might start going down the wrong road. We've also seen in Dave's program, and Dave, he's the co-founder of NextGen at Patterson High School in California. He teaches a high school trucking program. Think of like introductory trucking. Well, one of his first graduates, who is now an owner operator in California, and he was involved in a gang when he was in high school. And out of his 10 best friends, 4 of them are in prison due to gang violence. 2 of them are deceased. And he is one of the lucky ones that got out. And he got out because of this trucking program that he started as a senior. And he actually found something he was good at. He could see a future for himself. And so it's about creating these opportunities for these young people to be able to turn their life around and get them connected to a good career, and creating these training opportunities for them within schools.
We do a little bit of work here locally. We've got a school literally right down the road, just maybe a mile or so. And we're given an opportunity to come into the classroom, and typically I'll take our maintenance director, myself, and we'll go down and just talk a little bit about trucking. He'll handle the tech side of things, and I handle kind of the rest of it, the driving experience and the office environment. And it's one of the things you were pointing out is the money that you can make, especially when you talk about driving or diesel tech. That, if you come out of high school and decide that you're going to go make widgets, which we need those individuals in the world, but the price tag for those two jobs is significantly different. And it didn't take 4 years to be able to get to that point, to be able to achieve that kind of financial gain. And to that end, I know it's one of the things that brought me into trucking was I saw the opportunity for a better financial future for myself and for my family. And those types of things really matter. But sometimes when you can put them in front of someone that maybe isn't in the best situation, as you're pointing out with a gentleman that's starting out his life in a gang and losing friends and either to jail or to end of life situations. That's an amazing story, a really amazing story. The other day we had some conversation just kind of in preparation for the podcast, and one of the things that Hans, that you had said, is only a human can drive customer service, and that kind of stayed with me. What drives a statement like that? And maybe more importantly, why will customer service continue to be so important?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. One of the things I shared with you at that time, and I'd like to share again, is so my college, I was trained in the hospitality sectors and restaurants and hotels. And my college had a board meeting recently, and they were discussing exactly this issue: is how should we prepare the next generation of talent to be trained well, to be in a customer service function. And restaurants, in most cases, have a significant customer service function. So do have hotels. And they decided that that's probably the most significant thing to train people on going forward. And it's not to train everyone to become a computer scientist and code. It's actually to make sure people are functional people and excel at anticipating customer expectations, be strong communicators. And so that was a board level decision at a large college that made the decision to focus people on that. And one of the things they focus on as well is something that I always see at Gartner, is culture. How do you build a great culture in a company, a culture that is welcoming, respectful, and makes you want to treat your customer as well as you treat each other, and even better, right? So I think culture is so important when we think of how we deal with each other, in a company, and how we set the tone. And I think at Gartner, that's really what, whenever I come to Tim's office, I would say, I actually want to work here.
Thank you.
No kidding. And
That's
that's some of the magic that happens with people. And it starts from within. It starts from within us, and the culture we create in a company, in an industry. And as Lindsay said, the trucking industry is one you fall in love with for that. It's very unique. It's very, very unique. And I think it's up on us to keep it up, and it's up on Lindsay and her work, and Tim and your work to make sure we create great customer service.
Yeah, and it's not about just creating that culture, but it's also about communicating the culture to draw people in. So when a Gen Zer is looking on your website or looking on your social media to look for a job, they want to see the culture to say, am I going to fit in that with that culture? And that's why I think it's really important to have real life people who are within your company representing who you are in your culture. So you have to communicate that to people to attract them to your positions.
I think it's we kind of started the conversation, Lindsay, with that what that next generation really wants out of an employer, and some of the things that you had to say, immediately my mind starts firing at certain individuals that work for Gartner, and what some of the things that they will pour their hearts into that are above and beyond the regular work day. We've got some special functions that we do. We're very involved with Rees Across America. We have an annual bike run that we do coming up here in a few weeks. And I'll watch certain members that just get all fired up over that particular event. And again, it's above and beyond. There's no pay extra, anything, but they're just on fire for the event. And they want to be passionate and want to do the work. And if you allow that to happen with whatever they're passionate about, you really see the fruits and the beautiful results that could come out of that. But you've got to be able to embrace that and be okay with the fact that we're going to let this individual take the lead that maybe doesn't have the years of experience or has a title in the name or whatever the case may be to take the reins, and they will do incredible things. Lindsay and Hans, I want to thank both of you today for taking some time and talking with me. I think, again, a topic I'm very passionate about is the next generation and how we're going to get there as an industry. And I think it takes both people and it takes technology. And I think I have two experts on the subject, and just appreciate the valuable time that you've given me today. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been great chatting.
Thanks for having us, Tim.
This has been another edition of Beyond the Cab.